Hello and God bless you all. This is Salt and Light. Today we have a very special guest with us, someone near and dear to our hearts, someone who has been impactful to our youth, not only with her spirit, but with her services. Today we have a LMFT, yes. I believe. Yes, I said correct. It right. Yes. Okay. Licensed marriage family therapist. I introduce you guys to Sister Gabi Reyes. Let's give it up for Gabi Reyes.
Let's give it up for you guys.
Hello. Welcome. It's good to have you here with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So tell us, if you could just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe explain what a LMFT does, and for those who don't know out there. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So thank you for the honor to be here with you all. An LMFT is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And in the state of California, there's a few different classifications for licensed therapists. So that is my title, but I do work mostly with individuals. It's an interesting title because marriages and families are not the bulk of what I do. I do individual therapy mostly, but that's the license under the state of California.
Okay, perfect. So along with that, tell us who Gabi Reyes is and why she chose this route and this profession. What any experiences or just anything throughout your life, why you chose this?
Yeah, well, I think this was a God thing. I know it was a God thing, because for me, if you would have asked me, I probably would have chosen a different career path, like business or something where I would just kind of focus more on me. But at some point, God kind of opened doors for me to go to college. And I asked him, if this is your will, I will do something to give back to the church, to give back to our communities. And he opened the doors for that. So I was like, okay, God wanted me to pursue this route in psychology. And so that's kind of how I ended up here. It was kind of a long path to get here. But this is what I'm doing. Therapy.
Awesome.
That's
me.
Yeah,
that's really good. When I was thinking of this episode, I was thinking of that, like the fact that you are a therapist. It's a really like humbling and great way to give back, so that's really awesome to have, and we're so happy to have you a part of us and a part of our youth team, so thank you for that. Along with that, I know I've talked to like other people who are therapists, counselors, anything like that, and they all have like a life experience. Was that a life experience that kind of influenced them to say, I want to be that, or I want to be a person that maybe, younger me deserved. Was there anything like that with you? Or
I think growing up in the church, like mental health wasn't really talked about, right? Like I think people were experiencing things, but we weren't talking about it. And for me personally, I could say that I experienced my fair share of anxiety, probably some depression too, self-worth, self-image things. But I think getting to the point where, like I said, God opened doors for me to study this and see that, okay, it's not against what we're being taught in church. Actually, they can go hand in hand. And a lot of times mental health is impacted by our spiritual health and vice versa. Then that's when I think a path was carved, because growing up, like I said, I didn't know what anxiety was. I didn't know what depression was until I started going through my courses. And even in the Bible, like reading, different people experiencing their own, mental health issues, which we wouldn't call it that, right? These biblical characters going through stuff. Then that's when I understood, like, what, this is real. Emotions are real, right? Mental health is real. And of course, every person experiences it differently. But that was kind of my experience growing up, struggling with anxiety, not knowing what to call it, except that I thought, oh, I'm a nervous person. Until later, I realized, actually, there's a fix to this. There's a cure to this. There's a root to this. And I was able to kind of work within myself first and then help other people too. Kind of a long-winded answer, but
no, that's fine. I was going to ask you, because we were talking about this previously. And,
yes.
one question and then I'm going to ask you another one. But
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who doesn't believe in mental illnesses or mental issues, or what would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, I think in the church, like we were mentioning earlier, we think, just pray and it'll go away, right? And a lot of times, yes, there's power in prayer. There's power in consistent, persevering prayer. And at the same time, God has given us other tools, right, to live life. So the way that I try to think about it is like culturally, from a Latino background, that's not really a thing, right? Anxiety, depression, even suicidal stuff, it's not a thing. However, if we kind of start to chip away at like maybe generational stuff, generational trauma, then we can actually see, wait a minute, I think, my grandmother actually suffered from anxiety or depression. And this is how she dealt with it. She dealt with it by, caring for the house and working hard. That was her way of coping. And then we pass it on from generation to generation. So I guess what I would say is that every generation experiences mental health issues differently, but I think just now we're starting to kind of scratch the surface on what that means. And it doesn't mean that because we're suffering from or dealing with mental health issues, that doesn't mean that we're not living a godly life or Christian life. And I think a lot of times we think that, not we, but, people who, like you mentioned, maybe have these concerns, and it could be both. You could be very Christian and still, be suffering from things. And
definitely.
We're human.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. The other question, and I'm going to jump into this because I think we're focusing on women today, young ladies, youth. And the question that I want to ask was, when a young lady is dealing with trauma, maybe from her childhood or her early adolescent years, what would you say is necessary to start the healing process and just coping with it?
Yeah, I think for young ladies maybe who are underage, right, who are kind of under the care of their parents, it would be good to get the parents kind of involved and on board if possible, right? Because sometimes parents don't realize what their kids are going through, right? And if we're able to work together and normalize that this is real, and somebody who's suffered from trauma, it could be different trauma, it could be immigration trauma, right? Maybe somebody came here at a very young age and didn't realize the effect that had on them maybe till later. It could be sexual trauma. It could be child abuse. It could be a parent absent from a home. It could be anything can be trauma. And that's kind of scary, but at the same time, if we're able to see that every person can experience something that has changed their life dramatically, then we can start the healing process by giving a name to it, of like, okay, well, this person went through a difficult situation, and this young lady, this young person is dealing it with maybe looking for love in the wrong places or being rebellious, or, that's their way of coping. Then we're able to see, how do we get to the root of that? And having the parents kind of be involved in that would be ideal. A lot of times that doesn't happen, but I would say for a young person, if they're able to get into therapy, that would be a very safe space, because sometimes we may not feel comfortable talking to our parents about it, right? It could be the parents causing that trauma, and having a safe space for the young person to work through everything that they're going through, I think would be a great start. And normalizing it too, like I said, and anything can be traumatic for somebody. Anything that's too much too soon can be traumatic. Something that's not enough, like not enough care, not enough love, nurturing, that can be traumatic too. So I think understanding that for every person, we can all go through stuff that we may not realize the impact until later. There's someone, just very quickly, a person who, a child who experienced sexual abuse, in their early years, may not even realize that until later, like teenage years, young adulthood. And they may not know, like, why did I suffer with my self-worth or with feeling uncomfortable like all this time. And then when they're able to something like it goes on. Yes. Yeah. Something like opens up in their mind or emotions in that subconscious mind. Then we're able to kind of start that process and see like, okay, there's a root to that. Yeah. Right.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. But I think the short answer would be, let's start being curious about that young person's experience. Let's not judge them. Let's give them space to think about, what's going on with me? Where is this coming from? What factors, are being put into where they're at, currently. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, that definitely. Yeah.
It's kind of long.
That answered. That was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once someone has gone through the healing process, once they've entered therapy or have reached out to get help, what is a way for them to deal with triggers once they've gotten to a better place? Because I know personally I deal with the triggers from day to day, like anxiety or anything like that. So what can they do to better help those triggers?
I think the important thing is to know that mental health can be compared to physical health, in that in physical health, right, someone could have, be a gym rat and spend all their time there and then get the body that they want. But then if they go back to old habits, right, eating junk food all the time, neglecting their physical body, those muscles they're going to, lose that. So in some way we can look at mental health like that. And if we're not kind of on top of it, right, if we're not being proactive, we can get into a life stress situation where something small can then kind of set us off. So if we are intentional, if we set up systems for ourselves. So for example, if we know what our triggers are and then come up with a few coping skills that can help, and then have for me, I have kind of on my background, I have words that are helpful for me, that I could look at them all the time, that are calming and soothing. That works for me. For other people, it can work to have visuals of just breathe, or it'll be okay, or this person is safe to reach out to in case I need a break, or it's okay to rest, or actually I think I need to take a walk, I need to get moving. So depending on what the trigger is, having a kind of a go-to list that a person can easily access, I think would be great in the immediate term. And if we zoom out a little bit, maybe that's building more support. Maybe that's finding a hobby or interest that person enjoys that's really calming for them. When we take a pause from all the stuff that was working for us before, it's understandable that things that we had conquered then start to creep back into our life. So I would say building small coping skills, not neglecting our physical health, not neglecting our spiritual health, taking breaks or taking action, because anxiety likes us to do both, right? Anxiety, high functioning anxiety makes us think okay, well, I have to finish all these things today. Or somebody may feel, maybe they procrastinate. Maybe they have a perfectionist tendency and think it has to be perfect. So then they just don't do the thing that they wanted to do. So we need to find a balance of do we need to do more or do less? And then kind of move in that space.
That's good.
Yeah, that's great.
I like that because a lot of the times I feel we'll focus more on the problem. And I like the list thing, the visual thing that you said, because we need the reminder daily. But you were speaking about balance. So I wanted to ask you, how can someone in the healing process, say you did mention that sometimes the parents are part of the trauma, unfortunately. How do they find a healthy balance in an unbalanced home? What do you...
I think it would be really important to involve, if they're in the church, involving a youth leader or youth leader, somebody that they trust, because sometimes parents may not listen to their kid, but they may listen to another adult in the church. So if the youth feels okay, my parents aren't listening to me, I need somebody else to kind of, help referee the situation, that could actually be a good thing. parent, especially in our culture, we may be very closed off on our problems in our homes. We're not, really prone to like air stuff out there. But if there's an understanding that this is going to be for the better of the youth, I think good work can happen. Also, a lot of what I tell my my teenagers that I work with is parents may be open to writing a note or writing a letter. Maybe it's hard for the young person to like come face to face with the parent because they can feel triggered, right? And the parent could have caused a lot of hurt on the child and they may not feel comfortable, but a letter, the youth can take their time writing that out. The parent can take their time reading the letter. And then we can come together, or the youth and parent can come together at a later time and talk about that. Yeah. So there are things that we can do for the youth to like feel empowered to share what they're going through. And at the same time, we can do it in a way where the parent would be receptive to hearing that feedback, because a lot of times that may not be the case.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm. That is really good. I do have another question.
Yes.
So social media has like taken over the world, as we know.
Yes.
And especially in the church, it can be really difficult for young ladies to navigate their way through social media because of all the beauty standards.
Right.
So what can young ladies do to not allow social media to influence their perspective on beauty, modesty, and self-care and self-love?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it plays such a role, nowadays in concepts of self-worth. The advice that I give is like, can we minimize the time that we're on there? Right. Because I think if we're spending, hours, literally hours consuming content where then we feel more insecure, it's understandable that we'll feel insecure. So if we can limit that time and replace it with something that with something different, something new, maybe like learning a new skill or hobby, I think that could help. I would also say that it's a challenge, but I think that muting certain accounts or unfollowing certain people that we may just kind of feel insecure after seeing their feed, that could also be something that we explore. Also, social media is not real, we think it is, but it's really not. We only put forward one small part of our lives. It's not reality. Exactly. It's a highlight reel.
Yeah, the best part of their life.
Yes. And so I think, going back to what we were saying, limiting the time that we have on there, but replacing that with time talking to real people, like in real life. So maybe that's connecting with, the youth, or maybe that's, helping somebody out in the community that needs help. I know that might be kind of a strange approach, but those kinds of things help to build our self-worth. Yeah. Helping others or discovering more about ourselves. Social media is really tricky in that way. We see so many,
It is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's just with all the filters now.
Exactly.
It's not real.
It's not real.
And that's a good question. I like that.
Yeah, I have a quick question. It could be directed towards ladies and young men.
Sure.
And this is my way of getting a free therapy session. When it comes to just to go back a bit, I know we got to social media, but just to go back a bit on, when it comes to the kids and parents. Yeah. In a situation where like the kids don't want to, but the parents like are saying like, they're acting strange, they're not themselves anymore. Yeah. How do you approach that? I know like a lot of kids sometimes, they're in the rebellious stage or they do, just have natural trauma from their past and they just don't want to share that. But how do you deal with that when the kids become kind of defiant but it's the parents constantly tugging at you and asking you, hey, like my kid needs help. Like, so how do you approach that?
I think kids, well, everyone really, they just want love and acceptance, right? Like at the core, that is all that we want. And so if the kids are suddenly changing their behavior, maybe something has changed with them in terms of like, maybe they don't feel as loved or accepted as before. Maybe the parents knew how to parent a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, but may not know how to parent a teenager, so maybe the parent's skill set needs to change. Maybe the teenager doesn't know what am I feeling? This is strange. I'm not quite adult. I'm not quite a child. I'm in this in-between land. My parents are now, demanding certain things of me. How do I navigate? So I think if somebody can connect with that young person, whether it's, a youth leader or the parent, if the parent can get to know their teenager or their young adult, I think that would help the young person to know that my parents care about me. They're curious about me. They want to get to know me now. So that can look like getting to know what their favorite color is now, what their favorite food is now, who their friends are now, because those things can change. It can also be curious about what are they consuming on social media? Who are they going out with? Why are they in their room kind of all day? So that curiosity, I think, can open up the door, to connect with a young person. Also, what I share with parents and teens too is like side by side, you may get more out of somebody than a front to front conversation. Why? Because somebody can feel threatened, right? You're seeing me, you're looking into my eyes, you're seeing every, right. So maybe it's like, let's take a walk together. We're walking side by side. We can bring up, we'll start with small topics and then kind of go from there. Or maybe let's take a drive together, whether that's, the parent with the child or, somebody that the child can talk to. So side by side is the ideal position, to bring up something, a sensitive, kind of topic to someone and see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. To go with that as well. What are what can somebody expect in the ideal, I guess, first 3 visits with you? Say, however the situation came to be, they came on their own, they came with their parent. Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Oh yeah,
but,
let's do it. That's why I'm here.
Just for those watching, what can they expect? A lot of people don't even, like we said earlier, believe in therapy. They don't know how it works. They don't know, what kind of questions are asked or what they have to say, So how does that look like for somebody coming with any type of, trauma or situation going on in their life?
Yeah. So the first session, I would want to get to know the person coming, right? So I would ask some of these open-ended questions, like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about, what food do you like? What's your favorite color? What do you like about yourself? What do you not like about yourself? What are some things you're proud of? What are some things that you hate? If you had a few wishes, what would you wish for?
I think just kind of therapy.
Okay, we can do an on-air therapy.
Am I answering? Am I answering these?
Sure. Yeah.
No, but
that's very welcoming.
Yeah.
What you're saying, I think sometimes people look at it and they freak out, like, therapy. I'm going to be in a room with someone maybe a little unknown. Yeah. But what you're saying, I feel like anybody can be encouraged to do it. It sounds very welcoming, and the way that you do therapy, I guess. Everyone's different, right? But,
there are different therapists out there, and my aim is not to kind of point my finger and tell them, like, you need to change this and this and that. At some point we will get to, what do we need to change? But the first 3 sessions, the first one, like I said, is probably going to be more of an assessment, kind of getting to know the person. The second one might be like, okay, how did that go? Did you feel really vulnerable sharing, kind of personal things with me last time? Because that can happen, right? People can, especially in our church and our culture and our tradition, we don't share things, right? And so a person can feel quite vulnerable going from session 1 to session 2. Session 2, we'll check in and see, did we feel differently? Did we do anything differently? And then kind of come up with a treatment plan or treatment goal kind of from there. I will introduce new skills, new coping mechanisms that, that they can deal with. If we're talking about bringing parents. I'd have some time with the parents too, as well as the kid, or not the kid, but the youth. Sorry. Yeah. And then I would probably ask them too, why do you think you're here? Because sometimes I'm like, oh, I was dragged here by so-and-so, or so-and-so thinks I have an anger problem, but I don't. It's like, okay, well, and then kind of building on that. So I do try to make the space a safe space, whether it's online or in person, right? But making that time just kind of about them, and then seeing what can we improve? What can we do less of? What can we do more of?
That's good.
Yeah, because I was thinking while you were saying that, that like a lot of young people think that therapy is like the worst thing in the world. Yeah. I think it's like, if I go to therapy, something's wrong with me. Yes. Like, so what can you say to a young person? Yeah. Maybe you said it already, but to reiterate, that like therapy is a good thing, because I think now it's a good thing. Yeah. Maybe back then it wasn't, but like people are being more open-minded to what therapy can do. But I feel like young people are so stuck in like, it's such a bad thing. Yes. I don't understand why. Because I think therapy is great. Yeah. But yeah, what can you say to someone?
Yeah. We were talking like sports and soccer a little bit earlier before starting the podcast. And that brought to mind that the best athletes, right, have a trainer. They have a coach, right? And the aim of it is to help the athlete succeed. So the way that I kind of view therapy is like having like a coach. Like you could be, functioning and doing what needs to be done, but it doesn't hurt to have an extra person kind of helping and guiding, just like a coach would do that for an athlete. We can kind of look at it that way of like, okay, well, every athlete needs some kind of support or some kind of guidance, some kind of training. Why can't we? Or our pastor, he has a pastor, right? And that pastor has a pastor. So, it's a way to learn and it's a way to grow. And I think as young people, a lot of people like maybe see themselves getting married or settling down or just being in a relationship. And so why not invest in themselves to have a really good relationship going forward? If they don't do it for themselves, then maybe think about like, okay, I want a healthy relationship in the future. So I need to work on myself.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's a really good answer. Just real quick, we are going to go on commercial. Going to take a little break. We'll be right back with some more juicy questions. So go grab a snack, go read your Bible. We'll be right back. Just playing. Welcome back. Again, we have Gabi Reyes, the famous LMFT.
As if. Thank you.
So we were speaking on, what was the last thing we brought up regarding youth and their parents coming to therapy together, how it's done, how the parents can deal with it. You said, going on walks together, going on drives together. When it comes to that, I know it's really nerve-wracking when you are a young person with very personal things and, very serious things at times. Some people are suicidal, depressed. Some people are, using and abusing drugs and alcohol and, with sexual abuse. A lot of these things can be really daunting to share. So when it comes to a young person coming to you, what is shared and what isn't shared to kind of give, these young people a sigh of relief, like, this won't be shared, so I'm good. So, can you elaborate on that?
Yes, that's a great question. So therapy is a safe space. When we start therapy, I kind of read off the limits of confidentiality, right? So anything that's shared in session is confidential, except for if there's suspected sexual abuse, minor abuse, child abuse, or if there is a plan for the person to harm themselves or others, that it has to be reported. And I would talk about that first to let them know, hey, we're kind of getting in that territory where we're going to have to report this.
Continue. Go ahead.
Okay. So suspected abuse, plans to harm themselves or others. And pretty much, I'm kind of off the top of my head here. Those are the boundaries. Those are the limits of confidentiality. If there's a plan for the youth to harm themselves, we would talk about it first. Or is it just a thought that's coming in and out? Or is there an actual plan for them to harm themselves or others? In those cases, we would report. But anything other than that stays in that space, is not shared. So it is a safe space.
Awesome. That's good to hear. I know that could be really hard for young people to share such, vulnerable and confident, these things can be embarrassing,
yes.
Or these things, can be also very serious. But just real quick, we are going to go to another break. We have to fix some things on our technical side. So sorry for the delay. We'll be right back. Okay, and we are back again. A lot of difficulties with our cameras. We might have to upgrade if you guys want to donate. Cash App Youth Connection.
Accepting donations.
Accepting donations now if you guys want to further this project and this mission. But yeah, so back to that, the privateness of sharing information. I know you mentioned sexual abuse, depression, thoughts of suicide. So how do you actually determine if it's serious? Say, not that people are not serious about these things, about, wanting to harm themselves, but, if somebody just genuinely needs help, it just does not, even in the situations where the relationship is rocky with parents, how do you still deal with that? Does it take a few sessions? Are you informing parents right after the session, or how does that work? I know that can be scary as well. If it does come to, suicidal behavior, you want to save a life before protecting, their information.
Yeah. I would say, let's start with believing the person first, and then do, more questions afterwards. So if a young person says, I want to kill myself, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to end my life, let's start by believing them first and then asking follow-up questions. Because I think what can happen is we can minimize, someone expressing that. It's a lot for somebody to say that. And sometimes we can think, oh, they're just doing it for attention, like they're not really serious. But we don't know that. It could be that they are hurting so much, they just want the pain to stop. And so that's why they say, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to end my life. So let's start with believing the person and then coming up with a plan. Okay, if they are going to, if they would, how would they do it? When? What would the circumstances be like? And that would hopefully involve the parents and maybe the youth leaders, or maybe support people, because again, if somebody is saying that, it's coming from somewhere. So I always tell people, let's not dismiss that. It's not a joke.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, that's good. There's so many things we could talk about.
Yeah.
And there's so many free therapy sessions we can all get. There's just so many things, young people go through, adults go through, families. So we might have to have you 1, 2, 3, 4 more times.
Okay. All right. I'll clear my schedule.
But in the meantime, what are things that I guess you could share with us that you have, given to others as material, reading material, videos, just, anything, any books, any magazines, any other podcasts that you may have, gave to people to kind of see on their own time, or to do a little bit of studying on their own?
Yeah. First of all, Salt and Light. Right?
Hey, there we go.
That would be number one.
There we go. And I was about to say, what's that?
And then from there are a bunch of, maybe somebody is not ready for therapy yet, or maybe they're kind of considering it, but there's a bunch of resources, free resources, apps that a person can download, books. So a few of them, and I know that we were gearing this towards young ladies. So Boundaries was number one. It's a book by Dr. Henry Cloud, and it's basically that. What are boundaries? Why are they beneficial? How do we do that? It's a really good book that kind of includes just different scenarios where one would consider, do I put a boundary here or not? And what does that look like? That could be a physical boundary. It could be an emotional boundary, a time boundary, financial boundary, right? And sometimes we think of boundaries as bad things, but especially as young women, which this is kind of targeting, like, our minds can be easily deceived. Like if we kind of go back to, Adam and Eve time, yes, Eve kind of took that first kind of jump off the cliff. So that tells us, right, that she was deceived, that something kind of convinced her to, to do that thing that they weren't supposed to do. So all of that to say that we are creatures that need reassurance, that need, to feel safe, that need work on our minds, not just young women, of course, men, but boundaries specifically are important for young women because we have testimonies to keep. We have, goals and dreams to keep alive. And that can be hard in a space where maybe they really care about their boyfriend, or maybe they really, think that if they don't do this thing, that person's going to leave, because people in their lives have left before. So that's kind of a long spiel on this book, Boundaries, but I highly recommend it. Another one on the topic of trauma is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And it talks about how the body, like the traumatic incident could have happened like a long time ago, right? But we still might feel tense or like anxious, like we were talking about earlier, and we don't know why. It's because those emotions can be stored in the body.
Wow.
And we want to figure out, what do we do with that? How do we recognize them? How do we see emotion is actually a messenger that's telling us something is wrong? So this book, I think, does a really good job of doing that. Of explaining what trauma does. Atomic Habits is another one by James Clear. Yeah,
it's really good.
It's a popular one. It's not like specifically mental health, but I really like the concept of being 1% better at anything.
That's
at
good.
anything.
Yeah,
right?
I have
read
it,
but I've heard it's
good.
Yeah,
I have it, but it's just collecting dust.
Okay, maybe we could crack it open just a little bit.
I think I need to read it over.
And the reason why I like it is that 1% thing, like if we calculate it, it's really just like 24 minutes a day, right, of working on the thing that we want. So if that's self-worth, if that's, improving our confidence, if that's improving our physical appearance, our spiritual appearance, like just investing 24 minutes in our entire day, bring it down maybe 10 minutes in the morning, maybe, the remainder in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That's doable, right? Yeah. So I really like how this book breaks things down, any goal, any new habit that we want to incorporate. I recommend that one.
Yeah.
One more, Toxic Positivity by Whitney Goodman. A lot of times, especially like growing up in church, right, we can kind of be like, oh, well, you'll be all right. You're not really going through, so it's not that serious, right? And it's like, well, we don't know that. That the person in front of us is telling us they're going through a tough time. Yeah. So the toxic positivity can minimize the experience of the other person, and something that wasn't traumatic maybe for a previous generation could actually be experienced in this new generation. So I would say there's many more, but that was kind of a list of
That's
is
that considered gaslighting for this generation?
It can be.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now that you're mentioning books, that's funny, because with the next question that I was going to ask, I was going to mention a book.
Okay.
I read in the beginning of this year it was called Better After Burnout. Have you heard that one?
No.
It's a UPCI pastor that wrote it. And his name is Jathan Maricelli. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Okay.
I'm chopping his name. Sorry if you're hearing this. But it was a really good book because he's talking about the stigma of being a pastor and growing up in the church and with therapy. Because I'm going to kind of spoiler alert here, he starts taking therapy, and he says that he was embarrassed in the beginning to admit that he had to take therapy as a pastor. He had his family, he has kids, and then he goes into pastoring a church, and during that time he felt that he was burnt out and he had to start taking therapy. But I feel like in the church, there is that stigma where people say, you're in the church. Why are you dealing with these issues? What would you say to someone that has that mentality, that has that mindset?
Yeah, we are human and God gave us these emotions, right? The devil didn't create them. They came from God, and God made us in his image. The word says that. And in his image means, God feels stuff. He feels jealous. He feels anger. He feels sad. So why would we not expect to feel those things too? And we are just a sliver of what God is. We're learning each and every day. And so it is understandable that life can get us down, that we can go through things, not know how to deal with them, and then just having that pop up later on, or becoming burnout, like you mentioned with that pastor. So nobody is immune. Even Solomon, kind of the wisest man on earth, not kind of, he was, he was lied to, right? And one would think that, okay, him or King David, like the book of Psalms is a very emotional book. And so if these people, Elijah, he was depressed, until he ate something and got good rest and was like, okay, that's what I needed. My human body needed something to help me move forward. So what I would say to that is that we are human and multifaceted. We're part spirit, we're part body, and we have a soul as well. And all of those things require attention. So if we focus only, on one part and neglect the other, well, then we're not maybe living the full experience that God wants us to live.
Yeah. That's good.
Man, can't argue with that. That's really good. I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on like the gaslighting in the church. And I think you said toxic positivity because it's so prominent in the church. It's like, hide it away. Like it's going to be like, pat you on the back. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
How can someone deal with that? Because that alone is trauma.
Yes.
A lot of people deal with toxic positivity. I know I did, as being like a pastor's kid.
Yes.
It's like, shh, don't say anything. We got to be put together all the time, or you got to look happy all the time. Yeah. So what can you say to a young lady who deals with that? Because especially I feel like young girls, you have to have it all together all the time. Yeah. You have to look good and your hair has to be done. Yeah. And like if you're praying in the altar, crying in the altar, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yes.
Yes. So
I think it is I'm sorry.
No, fire.
Yes, fire. That was a great question. I think we in the church maybe sometimes like to put extra pressure on ourselves. Like as we were mentioning earlier, everyone is going through something. Everyone, from top to bottom. They may just deal with it differently, but if we are minimizing someone's experience by saying, you're okay, it wasn't really that bad, then like you mentioned, that can be traumatic, because then that can cause the person to doubt themselves and be like, wait, was it not that serious then? But then why am I experiencing all of these, thoughts and emotions? So I think if we can, first of all, look at church as a place where we all need help. The church exists for us to, first of all, come to Christ, and second of all, to lean on each other for help and support. I think that can change our concept of church, because especially in, previous generations, or even in our culture, we can put extra pressure on, the ministerial staff and their children and their spouses, where everyone is going through something. So if we can share that message with a young person that everyone is going through something, that could hopefully help normalize that, emotions are real. And that doesn't mean that, we are neglecting our Christian walk. That could be that, something needs attention, right? Emotions are messengers. It's telling us something's off. So how do we care for that, and how can we grow from that? How can we learn from those experiences? How can we get the support that's needed? So again, let's normalize that church is a place where there's a lot of messed up people. We're all messed up people. Otherwise, we wouldn't need God. We would rely on our own strength.
Yeah. And it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
I know it's like a cheesy saying, but it's so true.
Yes.
It's okay to be broken sometimes, to not want to do your hair,
yes,
to look a mess, to cry in the altar, and to not be judged for it. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
It's normal.
Yes.
We should do that in the church.
We should.
That's the place where we go.
Exactly.
So my father-in-law always says, he would tell me in the beginning, like, the church is a hospital. Like, people need to show up and they need to be cared for. God is like the doctor that,
Amen.
Yes.
And we forget. Sometimes.
Yeah. Again, that physical health analogy of like, we don't expect when we become baptized and start going to church that we'll develop, 6 packs and muscles and all this. It's like, no, we would think a person would be weird for thinking that, but we think that about our emotions and our mental health, that, oh, they just need to get baptized and then everything will just be erased. There's more to that. We're complex creatures. That's how God created us.
Yeah. Would you say that I heard somewhere that perfectionism is a like defense mechanism for people? Is that right?
Yeah. It can be a manifestation of anxiety. Anxiety of like, oh gosh, I did so well. I performed so well last time. I need to do the same or more the next time. Otherwise I'm a failure. Otherwise I'm not doing it right. So then that anxiety builds up. We either don't do it, or then that can lead to procrastinating, right? Yeah. And then it's sort of this addictive
free therapy
cycle. And it happens to all of us, but I think kind of going back to the self-worth of like, okay, I'm one person. I'm just going to try, and knowing that that's not sustainable. Just like, comparing ourselves to certain people on social media, that's not sustainable either for mental health. Like it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That's some good stuff. So this episode is geared towards the young ladies. And I grew up with 3 sisters and a single mother. So my respect and love for, just women naturally is like up here, So we live in a day and age where we're led by mostly men.
Yeah.
And a lot of these women's conferences is for women.
Yes.
Women's in their 30s and their 40s,
sure.
50s, 60s. I could go up more.
Yes.
So these conferences are geared to a lot of the much older ladies. What can a young lady do? Who can she look to? To, because it's kind of hard sometimes just, because we're talking about like church stigma and, all of that. I've never been to a ladies' conference.
Yet. Just kidding.
Not yet. I'm sitting in the back. So so what can these young ladies look towards, for inspiration, for, I know we have leaders, within the youth, but even then I feel like, we're missing something for these young ladies. So what can they do in the spiritual aspect, In
the spiritual aspect, I think, well, first of all, look to God, right? And second of all, look to create a system for yourself where you feel like you're getting closer to God. So for some people that can be, reading the devotional and the Bible app that day. And the reason why that's important is because a relationship with God is personal. A lot of times at women's conference, it could be a thing geared on like how to be a good mother, right? Or how to care for your children. And then as a young person, you're like, I can't identify with that at all. At all. Yes. Yeah. And so it's understandable that, young women can feel out of place, because if you're a single woman in the church or an unmarried woman in the church, there may not always be such a specific place. It can be hard to find your community. So I'd say, first of all, let's try to find a community, sometimes we can think, and I've done this too, like I'm the only one who's gone through this kind of situation, or I'm the only one, you know, in this circumstance. But actually there are other people out there too who are hurting but want support, you know, who maybe are like really introverted and have like major social anxiety, but they want like connection with others. So I'm not sure about like who to look to, but basically to create a community where everyone can feel some type of support, because living for God is unique for every person. You know, our walks are all different. There's a season for motherhood. There's a season for singlehood. There's a season for being a teenager. And if we think like, oh, well, I'm not going to serve God because I'm not a mother, or I don't have kids, like God has something for each and every one of us. We just kind of have to find it. So I would say, first of all, create a community. If there is not one, create a space. Second of all, figure out what can I do in this season for growing my relationship with God, and then helping others too, because it could look different for every person. So I know that's a long answer again to your question.
No, really
I think it's
really
just knowing that everything is a season. Nothing lasts forever. Yeah. And if somebody's hurting right now and like struggling to find their own space, knowing not giving up, and knowing that other people are going through that too.
Yeah. And I questioned this, and it's not a bad thing, but I had this question to myself regarding this, like that why isn't there more for these young ladies, or even just women in general? Right. And I think it's just been this, you know, ongoing thing for years and years in church, where it's just led by men mostly. And, you know, I saw it, and it was during Mother's Day. And I thought to myself, like, wow, like there's only one service out of the year that, you know, these ladies get to hear on a Sunday, you know, not their own conference, you know, on a Sunday. So, you know, just in my head, I think there should be a lot more resources for, you know, the older ladies and young, you know, the younger ladies, the new generation coming in. So we need some young ladies to rise up and start preaching, start giving devotionals.
Yes. Amen.
So we're gonna hit another break for a second, just to hydrate, and we'll be right back. Yes. Cut it. Okay. And we are back from our break, hydrated, fed, rested. So we're coming to our closing. This is where we'll get into questions from Instagram.
Yeah, so we have a question here that says self-worth and how to remind myself I'm good enough. So I think just elaborate on your perspective on self-worth, and then just how to remind themselves that they're good enough.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we all go through seasons, right? The self-worth that maybe was good enough as like a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old is not going to be the same as a teenager or a young adult, right? Yeah. So knowing that, okay, we need to continue to learn and be curious about ourselves, to learn and develop new skills and new things about ourselves will help drive up self-worth. Something that I think this generation does is, well, we all do, spend a lot of time on social media, and that can give us a quick hit, right, of dopamine, which is a chemical that helps us to feel good. However, that can just go up and down like really quickly. So we need like kind of long-term sources of dopamine. What does that look like? Maybe going for a walk, you know, working on something that we've wanted to develop, a new skill, a new hobby, you know, figuring out where are we in life? Where do we want to go? What needs some attention? What needs some growth? And then working on that, kind of like the 1% thing we were talking about earlier. If somebody feels like they don't like themselves, they don't like how they look, let's explore that a bit. Let's be curious about why that is. Is that an irrational thought? Is there some acceptance that needed? Is there some action that's needed? Because I know for me, even 5 years ago, I was like, oh, I don't like how I look, or like I would change this or I would change that. Now I'm like, I was fine. Like, why was I like worried about that? So basically it's only going to get, not worse, but like then, somebody gets married and becomes a mother, and then body changes happen. Then what? Then we have to accept where we are in life and be happy with that, and not regret the past, because that can definitely happen. So how do we build self-worth? For every person, it's different, but let's start from a place of being curious. Where are we? Where do we want to go? Is that reasonable? Is it not? Does that require some work on our end? Is that something that, is just out there and we just need to accept, certain parts about ourselves? So I think, not getting ourselves down more than we need to, and accepting that God made us each unique creatures.
Yeah. Insert the verse, I am fearfully and wonderfully
Yes.
made. Insert here. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think like self-care helps a lot with if you're uneasy with your self-worth.
Yeah.
I know, like for me, I struggled with my hair a lot. Like my hair was like really damaged for a long time, and I just felt like all these Black girls like on social media have like beautiful curly hair, and why does mine look like this? And so I think a thing that helped me was doing like hair care. So like a mask.
Yes.
Like, it makes it a little shinier, like doing like cute hairstyles, to improve that. So I think like just taking care of yourself is number one. I feel like really helps a lot. At least for me.
Yeah. And sunscreen too really helps. Like skincare, really like figuring out what skin type do I have and what do I need to do to care for that. That can go such a long way, and I totally echo what you said. Self-care in different forms will help us feel good about ourselves, and the long-term benefits. Great. Awesome.
Do you have any other questions?
I just want to, I think a lot of the youth, not just in our church, just in general, or maybe not even here, somewhere else, they jump into relationships that...
Oh my God, yes. I was just going to ask about boys.
Okay. Yes.
Let's talk about boys.
Yeah.
Very quick.
We'll just do this quickly. But like they jump into relationships where maybe like from the outside looking in, we're like, no, don't do that. Like that person doesn't value. Like you'll just look at them and just know from, a different perspective, like that they deserve something that will help them flourish, instead of like,
diminish what they are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Diminish. No.
What?
No.
Shots fired. No. Like I've seen that a lot, and I'm like, maybe we shouldn't step into it as like youth leaders or anything, but like, what would you say to a young person that's in a relationship like that?
I think I would ask, like, do you really like this person, or is it just you don't want to be alone? Because there are differences in that, right? Like somebody can feel insecure and think like, oh, well, a little attention is better than no attention, but like at what cost, right? Like what is she, I'm assuming it's a she, right? What is she giving up of herself in order to get, just a little bit of what she actually deserves. So let's explore that. And self-worth, that comes from God. And so if the young lady or the young person doesn't know, why am I valuable? Why am I special? They will accept anyone and anything. So I think if youth leaders are getting involved in that, kind of helping them to see what their worth is. Because we can search for love in the wrong places, and unfortunately it's a reality, and sometimes certain things can lead us too far, and then we can't turn the clock back anymore. So we're valuable, and helping that young person to identify what their value is, they'll drop that guy in a second, if they're able to figure that out.
That's good. Yeah. And it was nobody in specific that I was thinking at all. I just it's just things we see. So it's just things you see in general, and then with social media, you see, it's just. I always think about that Bible verse that talks about not mixing with uneven yoke.
Yes,
and I see the problems and the issues that come with that if you prolong the relationships.
Yes.
It's no, don't do that.
Yes.
But I hope someone finds their value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of young girls just see on social media that relationships are a good thing, and everyone is in a relationship, so I want to be in one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not the case, sweetie. Just don't do it.
Yeah, just don't
just
do
wait.
It. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other?
No, that's really good. I think that was a good one. I completely forgot about that. Relationships are a big deal. And I think
that's another episode.
Definitely.
There's a lot to talk about and digest in that, but dissect. I said digest. There's a lot to dissect in that. Both,
all of the above.
But yeah, that's important. I feel like we have our little moments when it comes to preaching where pastor will speak on that or whatever, but it's important to emphasize how important it is to choose the right one and to date to marry, not to date just you said, just to get this little piece of attention that you're not getting at home, or
and being comfortable being alone too, because just because somebody gets married doesn't mean they're going to be together all the time, or doesn't mean the self-worth is 100% dependent on the other person. It shouldn't be. That's when we get into codependent relationships. But I would say, going back to that, is can that person be comfortable being with themselves, being alone for a period of time? And if they're not, we want to explore that. We want to be curious about that. And because alone time is built in our.
Yeah, that's really good. So we can, if there's any other questions or.
I think we'll save those for another time. We definitely have to bring Gabi back.
Yeah, part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
10.
Yeah, so I think we're going to go with the 3 pieces of advice. Do you want to go with that? Yeah, okay. So, Gabi, 3 pieces of advice before we end, directed towards the young ladies.
Okay. I would say number 1, difficult circumstances don't last forever.
That's good.
Because we can think that they do, but they won't. 2, hold on. 3, I don't know. Just believe it gets better. Know that it gets better.
Yeah. Yes. I just talked on valleys to the youth. I taught on the valleys are not meant to stay there. It's just meant you got to keep going.
Yes.
If you're in the middle of a valley, just keep going. There's light at the end of it. Yeah, they strengthen us.
And 3B, be comfortable with being alone.
3B.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
I'll use those for me, even though they're for young ladies. But but yeah, as we're coming to a closing here, thank you for your time.
Hey, Gabi.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you all.
Hit that button.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you for your time, for all the knowledge. It's really late, but thank you so much for your time. We truly do appreciate it, and I know the viewers will appreciate it. So yeah, to the young ladies out there, don't be intimidated by some therapy. Don't be intimidated by sharing, things you've been through, your trauma. It's important to share these things with especially with a professional, but with anybody, with your leaders, with your friends, share what you're going through. It really helps. So I hope you guys learned something from this. I hope you guys maybe related to something that, she stated. But yeah, on Instagram, Therapy with Gabi. If you guys do want to shoot her a message and say, hey, I'm going through such and such, what should I do?
Yeah.
I don't know if that costs money. Just a DM.
DMs are not therapy, but it can open up a conversation.
Voice messages. But
yes.
Feel free to send her a DM if you're going through something. If you need guidance as to where to go to, maybe she might know someone in your area she can refer you to. But yeah, so don't be afraid to open up and seek the help. But yeah, we might have her on for a few more parts. Also, maybe some more books or podcasts, maybe on other topics. Maybe I might hand you a list and say, hey, for next time, I need a book on abuse. I need a book on depression. I need a book on this, on that.
Done.
Just kidding. But no, yeah, there's resources out there. Even if you want to DM her and ask her for a resource, she is there. But yeah. Thank you for your time, for your knowledge, and
thank you
for what you're doing for the kingdom.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys.
You're getting help for these young ladies and young men, teenagers as a whole, young adolescents. So yeah, thank you for your spirit and for your willingness to help. So.
Thank you. Yay.
Oh yes, thank you, Gabi.
Thank you, Jessica.
You. Like what he's saying. Thank you for your time. It really means a lot. We know you're so busy.
Yeah. We all are.
World traveler over here.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, we really appreciate your time and your knowledge, your brain, your thoughts, ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. I know. What?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We love you. We appreciate you. You do a lot for the youth, and we're blessed to have you in the youth department. So yeah, thank you. And then expanding here to the podcast now, you might be a usual.
Yeah, I know. You might be a common face.
Okay.
So
we don't pay. So just this is all volunteer work.
Status. Yes.
The only one that gets paid is our producer.
Love it. Love it.
But yeah, like we all said, thank you. Any final words for us?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the space. I hope and believe that this podcast, Salt and Light, will reach many people. And I'm excited to see what comes of it. So thank you guys for, all your work and time and investment into making this possible. And each of you are special people that the youth also look up to. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just before we go out, we hope this episode was a blessing to you guys. We hope you guys learned something. We hope you guys were able to maybe heal just a bit from hearing what you heard. But yeah, thank you for your guys' time, for your guys' ears, for your guys' attention. We hope you have a good night and God bless you.
Bye. Bye.